The drip had become the soundtrack to my procrastination. For 3 days, it was a metronome counting down the seconds I spent ignoring it. Plink, 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 a tiny, insistent hammer against the stainless steel of my kitchen sink. It was a small problem, the kind you tell yourself you'll get to, right after one more episode, one more load of laundry, one more anything. But on Thursday evening, as I tried to have a quiet phone call with my sister, the drip mutated from an annoyance into a full-blown antagonist. It seemed to sync with my sister's voice, a percussive accompaniment that made it impossible to concentrate. "Sarah, are you even listening to me?" My sister's voice buzzed through the phone. "Sorry, Jen, it's this sink. The drip is driving me insane. Just call a plumber." I will, I said, already dreading the potential bill. I was a freelance graphic designer, and work had been lean lately. A $200 service call for a drip felt like a luxury I couldn't afford. After hanging up, I glared at the sink. That's when I remembered my neighbor, Mark. Mark and his wife, Carol, lived in the tidy beige house next door. We weren't close friends, but we were friendly. We'd wave when getting the mail, make small talk about the weather, and once, they'd taken in a package for me. Mark was a retired something or other, always puttering in his garage, which was a temple of organization. I'd seen him once through the open door, a wall of tools hanging in perfect symmetry, a workbench cleaner than my kitchen counters. He had that capable, quiet demeanor that suggested he could fix just about anything. Swallowing my pride and my mild social anxiety, I walked over and rang their doorbell. Carol answered, her smile warm and immediate. "Sarah, hi, everything okay?" "Hi, Carol. Yeah, everything's fine. I'm so sorry to bother you, but is Mark around? I have a really persistent drip under my kitchen sink and I was wondering if he might have a quick look before I call a plumber and sell a kidney to pay for it." She laughed. "Oh, don't be silly. Mark, Sarah's here with a plumbing emergency." Mark appeared from the living room, wiping his hands on a rag. He was a man in his late 60s, with a full head of silver gray hair and calm, blue eyes that always seemed to be assessing how things worked. He wore a clean, button-down flannel shirt and jeans. Plumbing emergency, huh, let me grab my toolbox. 5 minutes later, he was in my kitchen, kneeling on a towel I'd laid down, his upper body disappearing into the cabinet under the sink. I hovered nervously, offering coffee, water, my firstborn child. "Just a little quiet is all I need, Sarah," his voice echoed from the cabinet, warm and amused. "This is a simple fix. The washer on this shut-off valve is shot. I have a replacement in my box. I'll have it done in 10 minutes. Relief washed over me. "You are a lifesaver, Mark. Thank you so much." I busied myself wiping down counters that were already clean, giving him space but feeling obligated to stay nearby. The rhythmic clinking of his tools was a comforting sound, replacing the infuriating plink. It was during a moment of quiet that he spoke again, his voice slightly muffled, but different now. "Less sure. You know," he said, "this takes me back. I assumed he was going to talk about another DIY project." "Oh yeah, fixed a lot of sinks in your day." There was a long pause, filled only by the sound of a wrench gently turning. "Not sinks," he said, his voice dropping. "Different kind of pipes. Cramped spaces." I stopped wiping the counter. There was a weight to his words that felt out of place in my sunny, yellow kitchen. "Yeah," I prompted, gently. He was silent for so long I thought the conversation was over. Then, he slowly backed out from under the sink. He wasn't looking at the pipe in his hand. He was looking at some distant point in the past, his eyes clouded. He sat back on his heels, the new washer pinched between his grease-smudged thumb and forefinger. "I was 19, he began, his voice a low rumble. "In Vietnam. I was a tunnel rat." The term meant nothing to me. I must have looked blank because he gave a faint, grim smile. "Not many people know about that. The Cu Kai tunnels. A vast, underground city the Viet Cong built. My job was to go down into the holes. Just a .45 pistol, a knife, a flashlight, and a piece of string. It was blacker than black down there, Sarah. So tight you had to shimmy on your belly, the dirt raining down on your back." I leaned against the counter, my chore forgotten. The world of my kitchen, with its scent of lemon cleaner and the faint hum of the refrigerator, seemed to recede. Mark's capable hands, now still, were no longer just a retiree's hands. They were the hands of a terrified teenager. The silence was the worst part, he continued, his gaze fixed on the floor tiles as if they were a map to that jungle. "You'd hear your own heart beating in your ears, a drum telling everyone where you were. You'd feel for booby traps, punji stakes dipped in God knows what, tripwires connected to grenades. And you knew they were down there with you. Waiting. Sometimes you'd hear a whisper, a scuffle. Sometimes you'd turn a corner and your light would catch a pair of eyes, and then it was just chaos. Noise and fear and trying to be the one who walked out of the hole. He blinked, and seemed to come back to himself. He looked down at the washer in his hand, then up at me, a flicker of embarrassment on his face. I'm sorry, Sarah, I don't know why I'm telling you all this. Must be the cramped space. Triggers old memories. Don't apologize, I said, my voice soft with a reverence I hadn't felt moments before. Please, don't. He gave a slow nod and ducked back under the sink. But the dynamic had irrevocably shifted. He wasn't just my kindly, handy neighbor anymore. He was a vessel containing a history of unimaginable terror and courage. I saw the slight tremor in his hand as he reached for his wrench. I noticed the way he took a slow, deliberate breath before tightening the fitting, a technique I now wondered if he'd learned to control panic in an airless tunnel. He finished the job in silence, his movements efficient and precise. He gathered his tools, wiped them clean with his rag, and placed them back into his pristine toolbox with a sense of order that felt, suddenly, deeply necessary. There you go, he said, standing up and turning on the faucet. The drip was gone. The only sound was the smooth, uninterrupted flow of water. Good as new. Thank you, Mark, really, I don't know how to thank you. It was nothing, he said, but his eyes told me the cost of that nothing had been steep. He headed for the door, and I followed, a whirlwind of emotions inside me. As he stepped onto my front porch, he paused and turned back. Sarah, he said, his voice quiet. Carol, she knows the broad strokes. But not the details. The details are heavy. I'd appreciate it if, of course, I said immediately. It stays with me. He gave me a grateful smile, a real one this time that reached his eyes, and then he walked back to his neat, quiet house. I closed the door and stood in my silent, drip-free kitchen. The surprise wasn't that he had fixed the sink for free. The surprise was the story that had come out of it. The surprise was the profound and sudden understanding of the hidden battles people carry. I had looked at Mark for 2 years and seen a stereotype, the happy, tinkering retiree. I had never seen the 19-year-old boy crawling through terror in the dark. The encounter haunted me for the rest of the day. I tried to work, but my mind kept drifting back to the image of a young Mark, a pistol in one hand, inching forward into absolute darkness. That evening, I found myself looking up, Tunnel Rats Vietnam. The articles and pictures I found were chilling. The diagrams of the intricate, multi-level tunnel systems. The descriptions of the claustrophobia, the spiders, the snakes, the constant, gnawing fear. The life expectancy for a tunnel rat was brutally short. The fact that Mark was here, 60 years later, fixing my sink, was a miracle. A few days later, I saw Carol in the driveway. I walked over, a freshly baked apple pie in my hands. A thank you for Mark, I said. Oh, Sarah, you didn't have to do that. He was happy to help. I know, but I wanted to. I hesitated. Carol, Mark mentioned he was in Vietnam. Her warm expression softened into something more complex, a mixture of pride and pain. He was. He doesn't talk about it much. It was a very difficult time. I can only imagine, I said, and I felt the weight of the secret I was keeping, the dark details he had entrusted to me. It was a burden, but a sacred one. A week after the sink incident, my doorbell rang. It was Mark. He held out a small, potted tomato plant. I was thinning out my seedlings, he said. Thought you might like one. They do well on a sunny patio. I took the plant, its green leaves vibrant and hopeful. Thank you, Mark, I'd love that. He stood there for a moment, shuffling his feet. You know, Sarah, he said, not quite meeting my eyes. The other day, talking to you, it was the first time I'd talked about any of that in decades. It felt, I don't know. It felt okay. Tears pricked at the corners of my eyes. Anytime, Mark, really, anytime you want to talk. He nodded, a look of profound relief on his face. Well, I should let you get back to your day. As he walked away, I placed the tomato plant on my kitchen windowsill, right above the now silent sink. It was a simple, living thing, a testament to growth and nurturing, to the simple, good things in life. My neighbor had come to fix a sink, a small act of mundane kindness. But what happened next surprised me. He had handed me a piece of his soul, a story of a dark and hidden war. And in return, without even knowing it, I had given him a small piece of peace. Our relationship was forever changed. We were no longer just neighbors who waved. We were two people who had briefly glimpsed the hidden depths in each other, and in doing so, had forged a quiet, unbreakable bond built on a fixed sync and a story that needed, finally, to be told.